And there we are. Well, everybody, welcome to the second episode of season one of Dr. Jeff and Friends. This is not just another health talk. This is where I bring in doctors, clinicians, and leaders that have stepped outside of traditional practice and really found something that actually works in our healthcare system. And as you know, if you have heard me talk before, our system is broken. Our system has been broken since I kind of got out of our system in 2009 because I started to see what was happening. It was being controlled by big pharma, it was being controlled by big insurance, it was being controlled by the hospitals and big medicine. And that doesn't work. And so it is time for people to take control of their own healthcare destiny. And that's what this is all about. And tonight, the fanboy comes out in me tonight because tonight my guest is someone that I am a huge fan of. The first time that I heard Dr. Dondi Nettles talk, I was hooked. I loved hearing his message. I loved hearing his story. So when I decided to put these calls together, he was one of the first person that I reached out to. For those of you that don't know Dondi, Dondi is married to his lovely wife Marcy now for 13 years. They have four kids. They're a combined family, a blended family, two from each side. He has been in practice as a chiropractor now for 29 years, which is a long time taking care of patients. And he's been with LifeVantage a total of 17 years. Actually, his anniversary of LifeVantage is coming up on the 18th, so just 4 days away. He was on the scientific advisory board for 5 years. He's been on the field advisory board twice now for a total of 3 years. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my friend and someone that I love listening to him speak, Dr. Dondi Nettles.
Well, Jeff, I am just so grateful at the invitation to come on your podcast, and I'm gonna have to return some fanboy situation. I remember the first time we actually met. I don't know if you remember this. We walked from a hotel down. I think it might have been St. Louis at an event. We walked to a barbecue place and just kind of had a
Yeah, I
impromptu
do.
conversation on the way down. And I didn't know who you were, but by the way you were talking, I overheard your discussion. I was like, this guy's got to be in healthcare and I thought you were a chiropractor or a naturopathic doctor the way you were talking. And so and then I've been watching you ever since and the things you've been doing with Team Heart and on your own, and just thank you. And so when you extended the invitation, it was an absolute yes. So thank you for the trust in me, and it's an honor to be on your podcast. And I'm looking forward to what we can do to help people truly understand, one, how powerful the human body is, and when they trust it, what amazing things it can do. But when they fear what could happen to it, they're already on a disadvantage. So I'm really looking forward to where this podcast goes today. So thank you again for having me on.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest. And you heard my talk in Las Vegas, and I think that's a great place to start this. I think that there has been a decline of healthcare and of the total overall health of Americans over the last 50 years. And people will ask me, when did I think that started? And I think that part of that switch dates back to a date of January 1st of 1971. And when people, and Dondi's shaking his head, yes, but I'm sure that unless you've heard me speak before, you don't understand how big that day was. And it was a day that I think a lot of people in government, in healthcare, and the American population thought that our health was going to turn for the better. And that didn't happen. It was the day that cigarette ads went off of television. So you would think decrease lung cancer, decrease addiction, things like that. That's not what happened. What happened was it was decreased money for big tobacco, and they needed to start making money somewhere. So they employed scientists that were addiction scientists that was making cigarettes addictive. So they took those scientists and they changed the way they were looking at things. And they did two things. R.J. Reynolds bought Nabisco, and Philip Morris, the biggest tobacco company in the country, bought General Mills. So now they could take their scientists and they could make food addictive. And it took them probably 14 or 15 years, but in the early and mid 80s, kind of when I was starting to graduate high school, things were coming out like Oreos, like Goldfish, like Lunchables, like Pringles. And that changed the environment of our healthcare because now, with all the ultra high processed foods, oxidative stress went up. As oxidative stress goes up, disease goes up, and we get into the situation that we're in today. Where do you think the big turning point was, Dondi?
I think, and as I was kind of thinking about what you were saying, for me, I guess it's when the collective system, when the healthcare system started to take normal biological responses in the human body and try to convince us that they needed to be medical procedures. And so, for example, childbirth, there were, human beings are the only species that has direct intervention in a sterilized room with masked up doctors to give birth. There's no veterinarians following around the pregnant zebra on the Serengeti of Africa. And there's no risk that, and they give birth right on the dirt. And there's probably fecal matter from the millennia of animals that have been there before them. And we don't bat an eye about that. And I remember having this discussion with some patients that when it's like, why do you think that a normal biological process like human birth should be a medical procedure? Have you ever had puppies or kittens at your home? And they're like, well, yeah, all the time. It's like, did you have the veterinarian over there? Did you give them vaccinations? Did you cut the umbilical cord? Did you give epidurals? They're like, no, why would we do that for an animal? It's like, oh, human beings are an animal. And then watch the light bulb go, well, I guess I never thought of it that way because they've always been in this fear mode. So long answer to your question, when we were somehow convinced and bought into that normal biological processes in the human body needed to be medical procedures, that's when it was like, it's kind of, you test the waters. What can we get them to believe? And then once they believe that, it's like, then all bets are off. Let's just go down that rabbit hole and make profits. And then I started looking at it this way. When profits increase, when sickness increase, why should we ever worry or question, why are they not talking about prevention? Because prevention is bankruptcy for them. When the sickness increases and profits increase, they're going to ride that horse as long as they can. And prevention has no method there and no voice there. And that's when I started to realize I've either got to be an army of one, and it had a big deal of why I became a chiropractor and not a medical doctor, because I knew I wanted to help people. I just like, how can I help people in the most biologically friendly way? And why I decided to be a chiropractor, I actually took it off the shelf and dusted it off. I listened to a cassette series from Dr. Deepak Chopra in 1980. It's called Magical Mind, Magical Body. And when I listened to this, it blew open my understanding of the human body. And I was like, I'm going to become a chiropractor because I want to honor that. I want to honor human physiology, and I want to teach people the magnitude of the human body that they're born into and they're living in. And if they can honor it and trust it and work with it every day, they're going to have the best life possible. But the healthcare system the other option that I would have gone into didn't honor that at all. And so long answer, that was what shifted for me. And what I kind of looked at it is when human physiological responses turn into medical procedures, that's what got my attention.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. It's interesting and maybe some of the people that are listening don't even understand that there are really three kind of distinct branches of medicine. There's chiropractic on one end, there's allopathic, which are the MDs on the other end, and then there's osteopathic in the middle, and that's where I am. I'm a DO, I'm an osteopath, and so we learned, the manipulation part and doing adjustments, and we learned the allopathic medicine as well. So we had that mix. But what ended up happening over the first part of my career, from when I finished my residency in 1994 until I got out of traditional medicine in January 1st of 2009, I just saw the fact that prevention was going away daily. The insurance companies were taking it away. Big pharma was taking it away. The fact that I was seeing my family doctor friends and my classmates and colleagues, they were given 6 minutes to see a patient. So their office visits were 6 minutes. And so you can't take care of a patient that way. And as I saw that happening, what finally was the straw that broke the camel's back was the fact that in October of 2008, my billing girl, the head of our billing department, we had a big practice. We had 5 orthopedic surgeons, a podiatrist, a rheumatologist, our own physical therapy department, our own operating room, our own MRI. So we had a big, big practice. And our billing girl walked in and she slid a piece of paper off the desk. Friday afternoons was my office day where I, did the business part of our practice. And she slid it across the desk and she said, "Doc, don't kill the messenger." And Aetna Insurance had paid me $875 for a knee replacement. And I said, "We can't do this. This can't continue this way." And I was already getting tired of going through the insurance companies for pre-approvals for surgeries or pre-approvals for medicine or pre-approvals for physical therapy. And I was getting frustrated. And so January 1st of 2009, I said, "I'm done. I'm gone. I'm not doing this anymore." And I was lucky that I had been playing around with ways to allow the body to heal itself, using platelet-rich plasma and stem cells. And that was where I started changing the way I was looking at patients and treating patients. And then I got more training in functional medicine, and I talked to some of my chiropractor friends back in the Chicago suburbs, and really took it to heart that I thought we needed a change. We needed a change in the way that we treated medicine, that we treated patients, and conventional medicine wasn't the answer.
Wow, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I remember right before I decided to go to chiropractic college, I didn't really know very many DOs. I knew quite a few MDs, and I started learning about Andrew Taylor Still, and the father of osteopathy, and D.D. Palmer, the father of chiropractic, and kind of looking at which one in modern day would be more supported by most people. And I was talking to, and I should have interviewed a DO to talk about a DO, but I talked to an MD, and they didn't have anything favorable to say, and it was a lot of criticism. And I was like, I don't want to go into a career to avoid criticism. I want to
Mm-hmm.
go in to help people, but criticism is just naturally going to come. And especially if you're doing things good, you're going to get criticized by the people who are either envious or jealous or want to do what you do and their window is closed or whatever the case may be. And I knew more. I knew the person who was the mentor in my life at that time was a chiropractor. And I think had it been an osteopath, I would have been a DO, because the training and the understanding and actually the first couple of years of the school is almost identical. And
Right.
so I applaud you for that. And I think you were kind of a pioneer in a significant movement, because people like Dr. Casey Means have similar stories as you. And her book, Good Energy, last year kind of really went into
Right.
her career, how she transitioned because she just didn't like seeing where the system was going, and how, more importantly, what it was doing to get people in the system with no way out. And the way she put it was, we're getting sicker and sicker, younger and younger, and we're dying of the same diseases, but at a higher rate, which means the
Yeah.
system is broken. And I think we're at a perfect time being where we are now, and how we met, and the reason we met. I think it's perfect timing for people who are looking for things. They're frustrated with what they've been getting. They don't know or they know they want something different. Oftentimes they just don't know what it is. And that's what I'm so excited about, is that we've got something that they're looking for. They just have never seen it in this context before.
Right. And we haven't even talked about LifeVantage yet, but one of the things I heard you say, and I think it was at the healthcare meeting, maybe in Dallas. I think you were speaking on the stage at that, and you started talking about the difference between health span and lifespan. And as I heard you talk about that, I started thinking, wow, this is absolutely amazing. This is game changing, because I never thought of it that way. And so I thought of my parents. I thought the fact that, my parents both died in their early 70s, back in the 1990s. And, my mom lived her entire life, no medications, no diseases, and at 69 developed colon cancer, and by 71 she had passed away. My dad lived first 70 years of his life pretty much disease free, really didn't have any medical issues, and then developed some heart disease, had a open heart surgery, ended up 2 years later having a second one, and then a year after that had a fatal MI, and died. So their health span was 70 years and their lifespan was 74 years. So the discrepancy was about 4 years. Today, the average person gets their first chronic disease by age 40.
Right.
And then they live from 40 to 70, or, if we say, the average lifespan in the United States is what, 78.9 or 78.7 or whatever that number is. Now they're living the second half of their life sick.
Sick.
So now the discrepancies 50, the discrepancy between health span and lifespan is almost 100%.
Yeah.
50% healthy, 50% unhealthy, which is crazy to think about.
Absolutely. And I remember when the kind of the I would say the stimulus for me talking about that was a book I had just finished reading called Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, another Stanford MD that got just sick of the system. And there was a graph in there that showed the lifespan versus health span. It was just goes up and it would slowly ramp down over the last half of their life in the lifespan part of it. But the health span, it was a drastic decline, level off, and a rapid descension. And it just made me immediately think of my grandmother on my great grandmother on my father's side. We had been planning her 100th birthday for probably 3 years. And she says, I'm not going to live to be 100. So don't even bother planning don't bother planning the party. If anything, you're going to plan the funeral because I'm telling you, I'm not going to live to be 100. Well, she had no diseases. She had her driver's license taken from her by the police when she was 97. And because they drove by and saw her front tire up on the curb, but she lived to be 99 years, 9 months, and 9 days. And she said 2 days before, she goes, you guys better stop planning the party because I'm not going to live to be 100. And she died 2 days later in her sleep, no cause of death, nothing on autopsy. She just went to sleep and didn't wake up.
Truly natural causes.
Yeah.
Which truly doesn't exist anymore. But
right. And she would still, because they took her driver's license, she would have to walk 2 miles round trip to the grocery store every other day to get groceries. And so she still had a great quality of life. And interestingly enough, her daughter, my grandmother, who was my father's mother, died at 77 after an 11-year battle of with emphysema and on oxygen. And she was a smoker for years. And I'll never forget her having the cannula under her nose with an oxygen tank smoking. I was like, Grandma, you're going to blow your freaking head off. You're right next to an oxygen tank. Put the damn cigarettes down. And she was like, and she just did. She was chewing the Nicorette gum with a caffeine or with a nicotine patch on her arm, with a cigarette in her mouth, with a cannula under her nose. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong? And my dad died at 63 of esophageal cancer after chronic smoking for years and years and years. And so it's like in my own family, my father, his mother died horribly of disease, but his grandmother, my grandmother's mother, died of natural causes. And 2 days before, when she went to the grocery store, she told us, I'm not living to be 100. And 2 days later, she just didn't wake up. And I was like, wow, this is in my own family. And she was on no medication, none, at almost 100 years old, and walking 2 miles to the grocery store every other day to get groceries. So it's just, and that's what I love about LifeVantage. And I think obviously we need this kind of segue into what we're talking about here. But another thing that really kind of blew my mind open after I graduated from chiropractic college was a book. And my entire focus, when I read this book called Never Be Sick Again, it was the first time I ever had somebody quantify exactly what the issue was. And the whole premise of the book is there's one disease. There's only one disease, and it's called cellular malfunction. Every disease has at its core cellular malfunction, and there's only two causes of cellular malfunction: deficiency and toxicity, meaning the cells need something they're not getting, and if you leave it long enough, it will start to malfunction, and then eventually you'll get a disease and it'll take your life. The other is toxicity. The cells are being poisoned by something in your internal, external, or both environment, and unless you change that, it is going to start malfunctioning, and if left long enough, you're going to die. And when I saw that simplistic, my mind just went, we now can talk to people on a level they can understand, because it's like, one thing I know, we are not deficient in PEMF. We are not deficient in red light. We're not deficient in cold plunges. Those are all wonderful biohacks. but we're not deficient in them. They give us an extra edge. What we're deficient in is rest, nutrition, hydration, mindset, and movement. And if we can focus on the 5 primary building blocks of health, longevity, and vitality and hammer down on them and find a way to activate the body, because we are deficient in oxidative stress or in antioxidant enzymes, we are deficient in mitochondria, and we are certainly deficient in NAD molecule. If we can figure out the way to turn the body back on with those, we just have the blueprint for longevity. And we don't, and the world doesn't understand it as well as we do, but they're all around, they're dancing all around the issue. They're saying things like cell signaling. And Peter Attia's book, Outlive, and Dr. Casey Means' book, Good Energy, probably the 2 that are the biggest on the radar the last couple of years, are filled with all that. They're all talking about mitochondrial health. They're talking about oxidative stress, and they're talking about a depleted NAD. They're just not talking about activation, because that's our vocabulary.
They're still talking about supplementation. Yeah, they're still talking about supplementation, which we know now. I mean, we've proven that, if you look at the LifeVantage model and you look at the fact that by taking the one little yellow pill, Protandim, once a day, you can make 1 million antioxidants every second. And in order to neutralize just 1 million free radicals, you're looking at 200 pints of blueberries. You're looking at, 50 cups of broccoli or whatever. It's just crazy amounts. You can't correct it with supplementation. It's impossible.
And you can't digest it. Your stomach's not big enough, even if you tried.
Yeah, I like blueberries, but that's a lot of blueberries.
I tried eating a lot of blueberries, and my kids thought I was a Smurf. I'm joking, but you can't. You can't eat enough blueberries to make a difference.
No, it's so we both agree that diet is one of the strongest causes of oxidative stress. What else are you seeing? Where else do you like to look at? I mean, I know we talked briefly about the vaccination issue and how the government has now finally stepped in and did something about that, which is just another toxic load that I think our kids really don't need. What's your feeling?
Yeah, and I feel the same. So both my children were both born at home. They're both unvaccinated, and not because I don't look at it as a conspiracy theorist. I'm a person that I need to have an argument for or against, and I will not decide until I read through the literature. And so I spent about 3 years in chiropractic college coming up and studying vaccines, because I was vaccinated. It's all I ever knew. And when I knew I was going to be a father, and I heard some people talking about vaccines kill you, and they had this anti-vaxxer versus the vaccine, I was like, what are we talking? Why would anybody not take vaccines? I'm vaccinated. And then I read a book, Dr. Mendelsohn, I think, is the author, and an MD talking about it. And then I found a website called thedoctorwithin.com. And I just started reading through some of the literature, and there wasn't a lot. And there still isn't. In fact, just yesterday, I had this conversation with you yesterday. The CDC just yesterday changed the verbiage on their website about what they said was the vaccines that proved, or the studies that proved that vaccines were efficacious. They were not evidence-based. They were just opinion pieces. And so they had to retract what they said was positive to support vaccines. And there's lots and lots and lots of vaccine studies, but it has nothing really whatsoever to do with a philosophy. For me, it had everything to do with data. Because if, God forbid, I gave my son or my daughter a vaccination and something happened to them, I would have to answer to myself, because I made the decision to do it or not do it. And I wanted to be that sure that if I deprived them of it and they died, I would have to answer to myself. Could I do that? Or would I just have to look at it and say, if I can't do that, then I have to just look at the other side. And so every decision that I make, I have to, 1, filter it through some common sense. 2, I have to filter it through some literature that I can stand behind. And 3, I have to just look at it as far as common practice. And there's a lot of common practice that doesn't have common sense. It has indoctrination. And that was kind of, for me, that's vaccination. But it is not just for my children, because as a chiropractor, 40% of my practice was pediatric. I had lots and lots of parents, because every year, even here in Arizona, there are bulletin boards that says no shots, no school. They won't let you in without your shots. Well, Arizona happens to be one of the many states that has 3 exemptions. There's a philosophical, medical, and a spiritual exemption. If you don't believe in them religiously, you don't believe in them philosophically, or you have a medical reason why you should not have them, or your child should not have them, you can exempt out. But the schools don't tell you that. Bulletin boards don't tell you that. And certainly Big Pharma doesn't tell you that because they want your business. And so it's just something I started to see the same patterns over and over and over. Fear mongering, deception. And if you know where to look, you'll find it. But most people just trust. And I think every person, and I am not anti-medicine, I'm not even anti-vaccine. I am anti-ignorance and I am anti-deception. But if you can do the research, overcome your own ignorance, and you have decided after doing so to vaccinate your children, you have my blessing. I will encourage you and support you in that because it meets your criteria. And if you do the same thing and you decide, based on what I've read, I'm not going to, I support you in that too. But I realized something when I was a AM talk radio show here in Phoenix for several years. And it was every year going back to school, I always had this debate because the bulletin boards were there and parents would come in and say, I'm concerned. What do you think about vaccines? I know your kids aren't vaccinated. Or some say, hey, you have kids? Did you vaccinate your kids? Yeah. I would say, no, I did not. And here's why. And I tried to do a show on childhood vaccinations, pros and cons. And I sent out, I talked to pediatricians all over the Phoenix Valley. There's 5 million people here. And I couldn't get one pro-vaccine doctor to come on as a panelist on the show. I got 6 anti-vaccine, or not anti-vaccine, pro-choice. They said, no, you do your own research. We don't vaccinate our own children. These were pediatricians. We don't vaccinate our own children. We will let you make an informed consent on whether or not you vaccinate your own, but we don't vaccinate ours, and we'll tell you why. I couldn't get a single pro-vaccine doctor to come on as a panelist, so I couldn't have a show because I didn't want to have 6 against 0. That's unfair. Right. That's misleading, and that's irresponsible on my part as a radio show host. So I wanted to have them debate each other and bring their references so the listener can decide. I tried 3 separate times, 3 years in a row to get the show, and I could never get it because I couldn't get a single pro-vaccine doctor to come on and I think represent themselves publicly, probably had the scrutiny they would have, or they were fearful of something, and I could never make it happen. And that was a very loud, and I thought, why can I not get, because it would seem that there's 6 times more people that are pro-vaccine than anti. They even say the anti-vaxxers, those are the fear mongers. I was surprised I couldn't get one doctor to publicly come on and defend their position with published evidence-based research.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the fear is they knew they were going to be the scapegoat. They knew they were the ones that were going to be the target, and obviously they didn't want their patients to hear the show, and multiple reasons why they didn't want to agree. I'm lucky. I live in Florida, and our governor passed a bill saying it's illegal for schools to keep kids out because they're not vaccinated. So, we live in a very free state, which is great. But the problem is, with conventional medicine, and you and I see this all the time, is the fact that there's a lot of pediatricians that if you won't vaccinate, they won't take care of you. They'll kick you out of their practice. My wife, Jennifer, got into a tough spot because she was a nurse in a pediatric office. She's done peds for over 20 years, and she's done the school nursing stuff, and then she did private practice stuff, health department stuff. She's done it all. But when she was in the private practice, they were a vaccination practice, and she'd have parents ask her, well, do I really need 4 vaccinations today? And she'd, kind of roll her eyes, and then she wouldn't answer. And then they would ask her the pointed question, well, are your kids vaccinated? And she'd say, well, no, they're not. My husband's a physician, and we've done the research and have elected not to do that. And and she would say, you can refuse, but the chances are if you refuse, doctor's going to throw you out of the practice. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate when you have a philosophical belief difference end up being the reason for terminated employment. But it happens all the time, unfortunately. And I truly think that all of the and there's a lot of, and on both parts, there's a lot of anti-vaxxers that are anti-vaxxers for the wrong reasons. Because they like the sound of their own voice, but they have no evidence to back it up. They're just pirating or parroting what someone else said. And I have as much disgust for those people as I have on the other side. If you make an informed decision, you've got my support because it's based on your criteria, not what someone else says to pressure you into it. But the thing is, when we can have an intelligent debate and you can and everybody can mutually respect each other for their decisions, and ultimately nobody's going to be unduly harmed, then I think everybody wins. It's just when the evidence starts to pile up on what happens when we've done things maybe anti-biologically friendly, because sometimes I mean, again, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm just anti-deception and fear-mongering and trying to get over on people, because I think ignorance and apathy, when those two things are prevalent, we have an easily manipulated population. But when people are encouraged to do their own research, ask their own questions, and they can have a civil, mutually respectful debate, everybody wins. And I just think as a country and as a healthcare system, we've lost the ability to have a mutually respectful, open debate on things and openly share our disagreements to allow us to be a better human being. And I think we've lost our way in that.
Well, and I think that's across the board. I think it's in medicine, it's in politics,
Yeah.
it's in daily life that people just feel that they can't openly discuss. They have to get in somebody's face and
Right.
argue and fight about it. And that's unfortunate. I think that's part of the reason that our country is in the situation that it's in. You know, here's the question that I'd love to pose to you because, we both saw the need to change. We both changed our practices to a more health and wellness focused practice. You did it pretty much from the beginning. It took me 20 years to see the light and to change. The majority of physicians either are not or won't do that.
Right.
They don't learn it in medical school. They have pharmaceutical reps banging down the doors, bringing them lunch every day of the week. Like I have friends here in Ocala that are family docs and pediatricians, and literally they have free lunches scheduled every day of the week and booked out for 3 or 4 months. And with that, how do we change the game?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think when you have a doctor that's been doing so long, has gotten comfortable, and they have a certain level of success and I would say relationship with their patients, and patients trust them and they enjoy what they're doing, sometimes with their mortgages, their lifestyle, they've just gotten so comfortable in their life that the thought of changing and going in a different direction, one, probably puts fear in them because they would be either cutting themselves off with their current rate of employment or what they're doing, or they're just so good at what they do, going back to school and learning a new profession isn't even an option for them. And I really feel for those kinds of people. But I think more and more people are being open to it when they see their colleagues successfully navigating those waters and maintaining their self-respect and going out and doing it, even if it means a short pay cut for a little while, because people respond to vulnerability, especially when someone says, you know what, I believed this for a long time. And then I learned that it maybe might be wrong for me at this time, and I want to do something different that's more beneficial to my patients, and this is what I'm doing. I think they would be supported by the people that they would have influence over, more so than the colleagues they would be leaving that would
Right.
be critical of them. And I remember the day that I sold my practice to go full time in LifeVantage. I had like 99% of my colleagues were extremely critical of my decision. Like, how could you dare leave what you're doing? You're helping patients. And I was like, I'm helping patients when my office is open, and only
Yeah.
when my office is open. And every minute my office is open, I'm away from my children. My children are growing up without a dad. What is more important, raising healthy, well-adapted kids or serving patients? And I said, I love them both, and I love my role in both. And their response was, well, just hire a nanny. That's what we did. And the nanny's teaching our kids a foreign language. And I was like, that's fantastic. You hire a nanny so you feel better about yourself, but you're still away from your kids. You just
Right.
have somebody who speaks a different language taking care of your kids instead of you, and they're on your payroll. So you obviously, and again, because they would have to admit, one, that they would have to go in a different direction, and two, they're comfortable in their lifestyle. And I wasn't judging them, they were judging me. I was like, well,
Yeah.
I want to be a father to my children. I don't want to pay a nanny to teach my kids a foreign language. I want to be there. I want to teach them how to tie their shoes. I want to teach them which fork to use. I want to teach them when to tuck in their napkin at dinner and when not to burp at the table. I mean, not hearing it from someone else. And I'm just saying,
Right.
this was my experience the day that I announced on Facebook that I sold my practice. I mean, I cannot tell you the criticism I got from my colleagues who the day before were saying how awesome everything was. Well, what they didn't know was the misery I was having in my life, never seeing my children. And I get emotional when I talk about that because being a daddy was more important than being a doctor. And I made
Right.
a decision to sell my practice and go full time with LifeVantage because not only in my town is the only place I was helping people, and only when my office was open versus trading that time for 24/7 around the world. We had people in other countries that were asleep when I was awake. So I'm making money while I'm sleeping, helping people on the other side of the world raise their families and be healthier. And I'm doing it at home with my children in the other room. I'm going to go in there and tickle them until they pee. I'm going to show them how to tie their shoes, and I'm going to be with them all day long and play dolls with my little girl while I'm helping people on the other side of the world. And it's like, that was priceless to me, Doc. And that's when I was like, I got to do this. It became my
Yeah.
calling versus I love my degree. I mean, that piece of paper back there and the initials that it gives me and the right to serve patients, which I'm doing now part-time because I can, but not because I have to make a living. LifeVantage gives me a very good living. And now my kids are basically out of the house. I don't need to be with them 24/7. My son encouraged me to go back into practice, but it's something that it gave me the ability to be what God called me to do and not at the expense of my family.
And it must be nice to be able to see patients and not run a practice.
So yeah, or have the overhead or hiring a
We don't
firm.
have,
It's
and
so
we
good.
don't have enough time to go down that rabbit hole. But one of the hardest things to do as a physician is to run that practice. And for most of the doctors out there, they don't make the first dollar that goes into their pocket until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. From 8 a.m. till 3 p.m., they are paying their overhead. They're paying their employees, they're paying their rent, they're paying their malpractice, they're keeping the lights on. And then at 3 o'clock, they start making money that they can put in their own pocket. And that's a problem with healthcare. I mean, the average doctor for a 6-minute visit now makes $42.
Yeah.
So when you think, I'm looking at some of the people that are on the screen, Esther and Elaine and Julie, and if you think your doctor is rich, think about the fact that they are working the first 6 hours or 7 hours of their day to pay to keep their practice open, and then they're working from 3 till 6 to make money for their family, and they're averaging $42 per patient visit. They're probably worth a lot more than that. And then the problem is if they go outside of that network, if they go outside of the insurance network, they're ostracized. The insurance company, if you leave the insurance company, it is illegal and punishable by jail time to take money from the patient for the first 6 months after you cancel the insurance contract with that insurance company. So if you drop Blue Cross and Blue Shield and you have a Blue Cross and Blue Shield patient come in to pay cash for the first 6 months, you can't charge them at all because it's fraud. So who's in control? The doctor or big insurance, big pharma, big medicine?
Yeah. It was interesting when you say that. I was always out of network with every insurance company because I remember when I was making that decision whether I was going to go in network or out of network, I was having some conversations with some doctors that were on both sides of the equation, and I became a certified coder so I could teach it because I trained other chiropractors in what chiropractic college did not teach them, which is how to negotiate a lease, how to be successful in business, and how to do the things that chiropractic college does not teach you how to do,
Right.
like be a successful business person. And insurance was one of them. And I remember being privy to a conversation between a doctor and the insurance adjuster who had denied the case. And he
Mhm.
said, how can you, who's never seen this patient, never took the history, did not do the exam, you're saying that my care is not medically necessary, and you don't even know who the patient is and what their symptom picture is. And I said, so this guy is determining whether or not you get paid, and if so, how much, or not at all? He said, yeah, that's the game. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not playing that game. Yeah, that just doesn't make sense. But then again, it's all about profit.
Yeah, it's all profit. I mean,
Yeah.
when the what CEO of I don't know what was it, Aetna or no, United Healthcare got shot in New York a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunate. I mean, somebody's life got taken, but when you look at, what his company had been doing to patients for years and years and years, you can see why it happened. And it truly is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that's the way our healthcare system is going. And I think it's going to take more doctors like Dondi and more doctors like myself to step up and say, we're not going to play this game anymore. But the problem is you have to be financially stable to make that decision and to move into that realm. And I think that's where, we haven't mentioned LifeVantage much. We're almost 45 minutes in, and we haven't mentioned LifeVantage much. But I mean, I think that's one place where it comes in is, if you promote these products to your patients because that that's what they need. They need to reduce oxidative stress. They need to reduce mitochondrial dysfunction. They need to elevate NAD in their bodies. NAD, for those of you that don't know on this call, NAD is the strongest mobilizer of stem cells from bone marrow to peripheral circulation. So if you have an injury and you're on NAD, your stem cells are going to come out of your bone marrow and go to the area and cause healing. And we hear all the stuff about brain health and things like that with NAD, but I think that's even stronger knowing that having a high NAD level and being able to make your own NAD can promote healing of any mild or major problem that you have. And so, and I think that traditional medicine needs to understand that every person should be on NAD before they go into surgery. Everyone. But it's not taught in medical school. So, um, would you ever not take the Tri-Synergizer?
Not even with a gun to my head. I say, because if you put a gun to my head, you better pull the trigger if you want me to stop taking, because I'm not going to.
Yeah,
Because I mean, and it's interesting because, and I'm not saying that because you asked the question. I'm saying that because I believe that. And here's the thing: is that right before it was it was a year ago, last month at the global convention in Salt Lake City, when I was asked to close out the scientific advisory board or the doctors meeting as a representative of the scientific advisory board. And I was like, what can I want to have one take home message. And I even shared this when I first got up there to speak. And I felt like an imposter. Why would they ask this chiropractor when there's on the scientific advisory board, there's medical doctors, there's neurosurgeons, there's scientists, there's researchers, there's bariatric medicine specialists. I'm by all means the lowest person academically and criteria wise on the totem pole. Why would they ask me to close this meeting? And I thought, oh, maybe it's not the question I should be asking, but the fact that they have, what am I going to say? Because if they and I said, I feel like an imposter, and all of them came up to me and said, no, we asked you because we believe in you. And I get emotional about that too. And I was like, well, I want everybody to leave with something, one line. And I went in the back because I was so scared. I had no spit in my mouth. And I was like, God, I need you to give me a message for these people, because this is the next wave of healthcare providers. And what I heard very clearly was, if we are not activating, we are deteriorating.
I remember that. I
And I
remember
was
that
like,
quote.
oh my gosh, that's so huge. And so kind of to your point, when that's the key difference between activation and supplementation. When you're activating the body, it is doing what it is biologically designed to do. You're just restoring the efficiency. And when you can talk, and it's interesting, though, the more we learn about how the body works, when it works the way it's supposed to, we learn things like the NAD in helping stem cells come out of bone marrow into peripheral circulation. It shouldn't surprise us, because we have no concept, literally, a very small understanding of what the human body is capable of doing and what it was designed to do. But we have a lot of information about what it does when it's behaving incorrectly and you manipulate it into more of that. And I truly believe that all side effects are just the body objecting to the chemical manipulation that you're asking it to be a participant in. It doesn't want to. It's innately against it. Sure, we can bring fevers down, and we can get bacterial infections down and stuff like that, but we can also do that by preventing it from happening in the first place. So, kind of long answer to your question, the whole thing about activation, the more we learn about it, the more we realize how supreme we are at LifeVantage to own what we own. because there is no supplementation that will ever take the place of activation or even be a partial, even remotely near as far as the potential impact of the human body. And when you can allow the human body to do what it was created to do, it does. Just get out of its way and let it go by fortifying it with what it needs, giving it the sufficiency that it's deficient in, and then just sit and marvel at it. And the more we learn what activation truly is, the more excited we're going to be, because that's the way the body's supposed to work. Kind of back to the whole point about we're living longer, but we're dying younger, but we're living longer with diseases and we're getting sicker younger. That is not a winning strategy, and that is not sustainable. And it is something we've got to stand up. And the world is looking for what we have. They just don't know we have it yet.
Yeah, no, and and we all have to be louder about what we have, and I think that's what it takes in order to get people to see what this is all about, both LifeVantage and taking care of your own health care. I was reading something last week, something popped up on my phone that a 34-year-old Major League Baseball player was diagnosed with stage 4 rectal cancer.
Yeah.
34 years old. And so, of course, I think Dondi's a lot like I am. I went down the rabbit hole. So it's like, oh, well, this is interesting. So I started reading it. And then that brought me to an article. And that brought me to some of the resources for that article. And what I learned was, now, this is the mic drop part of this talk, is that the fastest growing cancer group in the United States right now is colon cancer in 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yeah.
So think about that. Think about that. That's the fastest growing cancer in the United States right now. Why? Because they were brought up on breakfast cereal, Pop-Tarts, Oreos, Pringles, all ultra high processed foods. Their parents probably never gave them a piece of fruit.
Right.
Because they were bad parents? Probably not, because a piece of fruit's more expensive than an Oreo. Problem. So, Dondi, to close this out, I'm going to ask you one question. Other than your marriage to Marcy, the day you got married, the birth of your 2 children, what's the other biggest event in your life?
Oh, that's an easy one. The day that I asked Jesus to become my savior and live for him, because that put everything in perspective for me. I would say I was a reluctant recruit, though, because I was brought up as CEO Christian, which means Christmas and Easter only. We went to church twice a year, Christmas Eve and Easter. And and I didn't like it because we had to wear new clothes to church on Easter. And so I didn't know about God. I didn't know about Jesus. I just knew, and we went to Catholic church on Christmas Eve because my mom was raised Catholic. We went to Southern Baptist church on Easter because my dad was raised Southern Baptist. I didn't know who that guy was up on the cross. I knew who God was because I could see him in the stained glass windows, but I didn't have a relationship with him. And when I started learning,
you knew Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny more than you knew who
exactly, exactly. And then I took a world religion class my senior year in college, and I took another one my freshman year or senior year in high school and freshman year in college. And I started realizing there was this gap in my life. I believed there was something bigger, but I didn't know who it was, what the name was. And certainly wasn't living for him or it or whatever it was. And when I made that decision, it was after some research and doing some study, but it became clear to me why I was here, because I was the kid who asked early, what am I here for? And I would lay on the ground on my front yard and look up at the stars and say, there's the Joe versus the volcano moment in that movie.
Yeah.
You know, I knew there was something else meant for me in my life. It wasn't just to grow old and pay bills and, buy a house and all that stuff. And that's when it became evident to me that I'm living for a purpose, and it's now to go out there and help as many people as I possibly can in the greatest possible way. And then as a result of that, my favorite quote in the whole world came into my life right shortly thereafter. And it's Mark Twain's quote: "The 2 most important days of your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why." And now my passion is to help people find out what their purpose is, that why are they here? And so there you go, my friend. That's the answer.
That's a great answer. And I'll tell you, one final thought from me is I had a mentor, and actually it was my first mentor in in network marketing. Um, and we were sitting down, we were at an event, and he sat down having lunch with me, and I was at that point a successful orthopedic surgeon making high seven figure incomes every year, and he said, Jeff, if you're blessed, you make sure that you're a blessing.
Yeah.
And it's always stuck with me that I've been on 70 mission trips around the world, and now my blessing is to lead people to LifeVantage, because not just for, we've talked about the products and how great they are and how I'll never stop taking the Tri-Synergizer. I think most of the people on this call know that I have a 130-pound weight loss on the mind body system. Truly changed my life. So I believe in the products, but I also believe, I love statistics, and I love throwing out the facts that, 42% of Americans are obese, 50% now in the state of West Virginia, 82% are overweight. And those are mind-blowing statistics. They're a fact that, autism was 1 in 10,000 in 1975. It's 1 in 31 now. So we have to look at what oxidative stress has done to our lives. But that's not the ones that bother me the most. The one that bothers me the most is 57% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
That means that you're 90 days, if you lose your job, you're 90 days from bankruptcy. So, just a lot of things. I think, Dondi, an hour is not enough. So I'm going to have to bring you back, brother, in maybe another month or 6 weeks.
I would be honored to come back, my friend. Thank you so, so much. And I want to leave you with one parting thing. And I didn't, you said it before, and I heard you say it a couple of days ago about the number, or the fastest growing section of cancer, people between 18 and 25. And the first thing that immediately hit me when you said it this time is that 18 to 25-year-old humans are still growing, and they're still physically maturing. And here's the thing that violates nature on every level. Nothing in nature dies while it's still growing,
Right.
unless there's something wrong. And so if the fastest growing form of cancer in the human species is affecting people that are still growing, something is drastically wrong, because that defies nature.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for listening to us. And this is what I want you to take home from tonight's call, is I want you to understand that you don't have a hormone problem. You don't have a weight problem. You have a metabolic problem. You have a systems problem. And that if you can fix the system, you can change everything. And that means fixing your body system. It means fixing the healthcare system. It needs a system change. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for joining me with Dr. Jeff and Friends. Just a little housekeeping. Next week, I'm doing an overview, brand new overview. I've been working on it. I've stole slides from Dondi. I've stole slides from Brandon Cunningham, from Gabe Pearson, putting my own spin on the LifeVantage story. So that's next week. It'll be every other week. And then in 2 weeks, another episode of Dr. Jeff and Friends. I'm bringing in a great orthopedic surgeon friend of mine, Dr. Jack Rocco. And Dr. Rocco joined LifeVantage with me early on, but he's got away from orthopedic surgery, and he's doing wellness and mostly men's health. So if you have any guys in your life that you want to hear from an expert in men's health, what oxidative stress can do to men and how it can ruin their lives, their thought patterns, their libido, their family life, this is going to be the talk for you. So I'll see y'all next week. Love you all. God bless. Bye-bye.